politeness and address forms. So first, we will define what is politeness. So according to Crystal in 2006 in his chapter on pragmatics, he defined politeness as a term that signifies linguistic features associated with norms of social behavior in relation to notions like courtesy, rapport, deference, and distance. Meaning, politeness is a system of interpersonal relations. So it is designed to facilitate interaction by minimizing the potential of conflicts and confrontations inherent in all human interchange. So such features discourse markers such like please or the suitable tone of voice and tolerable forms of address. Being polite is a complicated business in any language, so it stresses how complicated it is to be interculturally polite and tactful since politeness is a universal linguistic variable. So it is difficult to learn because it involves understanding not just the language but also the social and cultural values of the community. And also, politeness in language goes far beyond being used to say thank you and please or not talking with your mouth full. But it involves a great deal more than the superficial politeness routines that parents or the adults teach the young ones. Here is one example of how politeness and address forms are being used. Instead of saying, "Hey Elijah, got a minute?" you must say, "Excuse me, Mr. Castro, but can I talk to you for a minute?" So now we will discuss the means of expressing politeness and tolerable forms of address. The first one is the use of intonation and the tone of voice. So these functions of speech in a language has the power to render a polite utterance both more and less polite. For example, "Are you the new secretary?" So the tone and intonation used suggest you do not know the person, and so it is less suitable and less polite. Another example, "Are you the new secretary?" So the tone and intonation used means something like, "Am I right in thinking you are the new secretary, the person I've heard so much about?" And that is more appreciated. So for number two, it contributes to social harmony and avoiding social conflicts. So it maintains harmonious relations and avoid causing trouble. So as you can see in our PowerPoint, the example shows that being polite involves adapting sensitively to evolving social relationships. So the interaction between the nurse and Mr. Grant begins with a polite greeting by the nurse and checking the response of the patient. So seeing that the patient is friendly, that's when the nurse shifts to a more casual style, which was also addressed informally and casually by Mr. Grant. So the interchange of conversations of the two participants actively negotiating a more comfortable way of relating to each other. So third, we have here involved the dimension of formality. So the appropriate way of talking to a person will depend on your roles in the context. For example, a conversation between you and your friend who is also a CEO of a company. So if he is acting as CEO in front of the other employees, you can just call him by his first name, just like Elijah. It will be disrespectful. While outside the company or when you're having dinner with him, calling him Mr. Castro will be perceived inappropriate or something humorous. So number four, appropriate degree of social distance. So we must select linguistic forms which express the appropriate degree of social distance or which recognize relevant status or power differences. So the letter A in our example, this might offend the customer if the delivery man treated her too familiarly. While for the letter B, it is less polite if the director treats his colleagues too distantly. So number five, the type of relationship involved. So this contributes to the assessment of social distance and to the appropriate way of being polite. So for number five, the type of relationship involved. So the given example in our PowerPoint, it contributes to the assessment of social distance and to the appropriate way of being polite. So lastly, we must remember that interaction is not static. So interaction must be interactive and the conversations must flow with intended satisfaction. So for the given example, we can see here that the conversation starts in a sociable manner but deteriorates when June didn't give a convincing excuse, which upsets Frances and comment in a sarcastic way, making June end the conversation. People from culturally different speech communities often expresses particular speech acts differently and uses different rules of interaction. So as a result, misunderstandings may arise and they may unwittingly offend one another. So these features of politeness and forms of address may develop our perspective taking ability that may teach us to communicate in a better way.